Hello, I'm the Smoking Cheddar, but you definitely already knew that. Um, Welcome to another unit build, and we've got a good one for you this week. We have a artillery unit build, a field artillery unit build. So, what's the scenario? We need a utility-based artillery piece that is going to be good in counter battery and damaging enemy bases. The Slingshot. So, as always, guys, we are going to be looking at the technology in the unit. We'll be looking at the officers and the trained skills. And at the end, we will give a summary on how the unit works with the officers. So, make sure you got yourself a drink of water and some snacks. Make sure that Lord of the Rings is on the TV. But try not to get distracted because, you know, it is Lord of the Rings. Get yourself some headphones so you're not going to disturb anyone else. And for the 25% of you that watch this on the TV, there's a fridge with a beer in, I guess. Just there's a random statistic I found out the other day about my channel, but whatever. So you've got plenty of you out there that are watching me on a TV. I don't know how that big head on the screen. I don't know. Anyway, let's have a look at the unit. What we're going to do is we're going to compare the 4 stars together of both the Liberty gun and the Martyr howitzer. We're going to look into the reason why we want the Martyr. So let's have a look at the Liberty first and the attributes. We've got personnel damage, armor damage, and fortification damage. Obviously, we've got 388 load time, fortification multiplier of 300. Now we've got 708 in personnel and 708 in armor, and 17 in fortification with only a 250% multiplier for fortifications. But this is predominantly a field artillery piece. This is not necessarily a counter battery piece. This is simply a field piece that we can use to hit enemy bases with a degree of good effect, I'd like to point out. So that extra personnel damage, that extra armor damage is going to go a long way for us. It is going to be a massive help. And of course, my favourite tree, the artillery tree in advanced. It is always a case of do as I say, not as I do. Now, this is going to be pretty much a tricky one because this is going to basically require you to max out this tree. If we had to be very specific, we would want to look at the load time, the firepower, and the HP, as well as the resistances and the intensity bonuses, which is realistically only leaving us the movement speed that we're not maxing out, and the camp reserve capacity. That's the word I was looking for. So realistically, we're looking at getting as many advantages on this gun as humanly possible. Let's just have a reminder of the pictured text before we go into the modern tree, though. So I don't think there's really much that we can gain from looking at these stats when most of these, much like the load time reduction, firing accuracy, blast mitigation bonus we're going to need because we're going to be fighting other artillery, resistance, intensity, you get the picture. God of War. When your artillery attacks, there is a 10% chance the next attack's load time will be reduced by 40%. This is going to be key to our build, is load time, because we are going to want to deal as much damage as possible, leveraging a number of additional mechanics. So let's go and have a look. Automatic loading devices. When there are no enemies within 2 map grids of the howitzer, its firepower is increased by an additional 5%. Well, that's going to be the idea, is we're going to get an additional 5% bonus because we want to have as many map grids between us and the enemy as possible. onto the modern tree. As always, when it comes to the modern tree, we are starting at the middle and we're working back to the start. And the reason being is that even with these advanced builds, getting halfway through the modern tree takes a very long time. Smart ammunition. Every 3 shots, the howitzer troop gains a 50% firepower bonus for 4 seconds. So this is why we're going to need the load time reduction, is because we want to absolutely capitalize on this. And as before, we are going to be out in the field, so we're going to need damage resistance bonuses. We are going to need blast mitigation bonuses. We are going to need HP, and we are going to certainly need firepower. So here we have a load time reduction, and even at gold 1 it's still a load time reduction, and a load time reduction does give us blast power radius, sorry, it does give us firepower and blast radius as well, and that is for the first part. The gun mount, again, we've only got one version, which is a HP and blast mitt. HP and blast mitt. And again. And for the towing, we've got HP and troop speed. We do get a variation here. I was unaware of this. You're probably going to want the blast mitigation one. And the reason being is in an artillery duel, it's not going to be who has the most HP, it's going to be who can survive the most blast damage, because we're looking at dealing normal attack damage. And this is probably going to be an artillery duel piece. But it looks like for a gold plus, at least, not necessarily for a gold plus plus, but for a gold plus at least, you have an option of blast mitt or HP. I'd take the blast mitt personally, although an additional 590 bonus HP is pretty tasty. We're not looking at the HP for the 4 slot. For the auxiliary slot, we are looking at the firepower, plain and simple. For the first officer, we are looking at Frostfire, Viktor Ivanovich. Yes, everyone's new favourite squeeze on the block. Why do we want this officer? Well, you've probably already watched the video, if you are here that is, that I done on this officer, and you're aware of where we're going with this. On the chance that you are not, or have not, or this is your first time watching me, feel sorry for you, by the way. Not because it's your first time, but because you've stumbled across my channel entirely. That's another matter in of itself. Is because this officer really excels at firing at units, which is really irritating in terms of artillery, because we only really like artillery being good at shooting at units when it's inside the base. We don't really like it out in the field because it's slow, it's heavy, it's cumbersome. Even with its range, it's risky. It can easily have a fast MBT, helicopter or light tank close a distance and kill it. We see it all the time in L4s, Conquest 4s, C4s, whatever you want to call them. But why do we want this officer? Well, it is specifically for this skill. We can deal up to 1500 damage coefficiency, which is great, but we are also getting an additional 200 damage coefficiency for every 1 map grid in between you and the target. Now, the map grid you're sat on doesn't count, and if there is no space between you and the target, that doesn't count either. So it has to be at least 1 map grid away, so there has to be 1 block between you and him. That's a 200 skill damage right there. You get another map grid, that's going to be another 200. You get another map grid, that is going to be another 200. So you have up to 600 skill damage between you and the target. You've got a 4 range artillery piece, and you can have up to 3 empty spaces between you and the target. We also get a damage intensity while out in the field, which is very handy for sustained fights and also for even shorthand fights where we're just using a lot of shots. We have an increased officer skill boost here, so that's going to come in handy for the awakened skill. And we have this skill damage reduction, which is very, very nice. And I know I scored it very, very low, and it does sound like I'm contradicting myself here. But if we are in a fight where there is splash damage available, this has a potential to mitigate any splash damage that might be done to us via a skill attack, which could otherwise hinder or cripple the artillery piece. It won't deflect a direct hit from a siege gun, okay? This isn't going to save your artillery piece from a direct hit. It will save your artillery piece from a splash damage hit. Almost certainly it'll save your artillery piece from a splash damage hit. So that is worth remembering. Even when you're attacking a base, this still has a use, but it is not a trainable. It is a trainable skill, but it's not really worth training onto any artillery piece when your main goal is to deal damage. And the awakened skill, we have a 25% chance on attack to drop a 450 skill shot for free onto the enemy troop, which is very nice in terms of what we're trying to do. I hear you say, what then are the trained skills? Well, you would think I would advise intensity. Most weeks you would be correct. This week I'm going to advise firepower, and the reason, before we go any further, is because of this. If we are looking to pop this skill in the field, when it does pop, we want it to hit as hard as possible. We know the damage coefficient is some way, whether it's a multiplier or not, tied to the firepower of the unit. So the higher the firepower, the better. Now we know that the Martyr artillery pieces typically have higher firepower. How do we know this? Camp bonus. Higher firepower than other howitzers from other camps. So we're playing on this specifically right here. This is what we're after. Okay. That's why we're using that. That's why we're looking at training in firepower as the first skill, or the second skill on this officer. It doesn't really matter. What does matter is what you pick for the special. Now, a load time reduction, not necessarily fire at will, although this is the one I do show, because as always guys, with these build videos, I won't say never because of last week's build video, hardly ever use, I should say, once in a blue moon, will use a premium skill, a lounge officer skill, a paid for skill. Now, I know I'd done that in my anti-tank gun video, but that's because someone asked me specifically about my anti-tank gun, and I was just really keen to talk about my anti-tank gun. I digress. Most of these videos, 99% of them, we are looking at the free-to-play officers. However, you can get this skill elsewhere in the lounge if you're prepared to spend the time and effort to train it in at a slightly better degree. Load time reduction. I believe that says it all, really. We are looking for a load time reduction. We know why we're looking for a load time reduction, because we want this skill to pop off. Shall we have a look at the aid? This is going to be one of the rare occasions where, again, I'm going to recommend Champion of the People. Not because she is particularly good in any way, shape or form, but because she gives us a 1 additional map grid, which can only be attained at the moment for artillery through 3 officers, and this is the only free-to-play officer that provides that skill. We get an additional skill boost here, which, as we discussed in the previous video, this is applied to the officer, not to the troop. I think I initially said it was applied to the troop, and then I corrected myself almost immediately and said it was the officer. We get a damage intensity bonus here, and we also have a 1200 coefficiency, which is boosted by 25%, which brings us up to 1500. Plus we get an additional 25% on top of that. But the one map grid makes all the difference, because you remember we get an additional 200 skill damage for having that one map grid, and that is significant. Because if we're looking at a 25% increase on a 25% increase, bringing up to 15, we're looking at what? 375 is 1875-ish, give or take, as your skill damage on this officer. And then we're looking at max range, effectively, giving us 4 grids, 1500 plus 17, 19, 21, 23. Okay, so we're getting a nice 23 skill damage on top of that 18. So we're looking at dealing quite a bit of skill damage. Very, very, very good just for simply dropping hate on a heavily armoured target out in the field like a super heavy or an MBT, but really good against the base, because that is a lot of skill damage to leverage, which is why we have selected firepower over intensity. Okay, so the first trained skill in, we can ignore the bit where I had the damage normal attack buff on there. The first skill we want trained in is home on the range, because we get a flat 30%, and if we are out in the field, i.e. we're outside the base, sniping units coming towards us, or sniping units driving past us, we do get an additional 5% on top of that. So that is very nice, and again, that is going to play into the skill damage buff. We also have HP and firepower, so we're going to get an additional 5% here, but we can use any balance skill that is going to use a combination of these. That's just the first one I chose. I know there's another one around there that does 10-10, whatever, or 15-5 the other way around. The point is we're looking for firepower HP. How does all of this fit together? It fits together by utilizing a high level of firepower and load time reduction in order to trigger a tactical skill out in the field, and when against an enemy base, utilizing a different map grid to increase the skill damage using firepower and coefficiency. We're looking at being able to level enemy targets as quickly as possible, and this might actually be the first build where Champion of the People is kind of key, and you do kind of want this howitzer because it has the highest amount of firepower, and we're not looking to receive normal attack bonuses versus fortifications. We're looking to have normal attack bonuses versus the units, because when we're out in the field, that's what we're going to find most useful. I do genuinely believe that this is one of those rare instances where Champion of the People is really going to shine, because we're going to put her as the aid with Frostbite, who is going to excel with having that extra map grid. That extra 200 is going to make a lot of difference with the extra firepower that we are pumping onto this unit. This is going to be great for pop-out attacks, because we're going to be getting the bonus from Justice in our base in active territory of 5% firepower on top of that already stonking 30% firepower bonus. We're going to be getting quite a lot of HP and firepower bonuses from the balance skill, and we're getting the load time reduction from War Machine. Now, admittedly, like I said earlier, we can get that from elsewhere in the lounge, and we can get one that is going to increase the normal attack bonus from the lounge as well. But that is up to you where you get that skill from. Yes, you could totally argue that Madame Victor, sorry, is it Victor? Madame something or other, the lounge officer with the +1 map grid, and Lady Liberty with the +1 map grid are by far superior officers in terms of champion of the people, and I'm simply not going to deny that. That is 100% true. And they're better at their respective jobs than champion of the people is. And ideally, if you have one of those two officers awakened, you would use one of them instead. But the problem is that not everyone has 13, I think it was 13 months it took me to get Darkwing in the season that just finished last week at time of recording, just weekend just gone. So not everyone is capable of doing that, and that's fine. Okay, that's fine. This is to provide you with an alternative to the lounge officers, to give you a fighting chance, as it were, in terms of field artillery. Now, should you focus on field artillery over, say, a defensive gun with Argent Flame and Stinger Fist, or a siege gun with Ventura and Eye of Providence? No. Quite factually, no. Because those two are two very dedicated guns. One is going to massively help you in defense and also be pretty good in attack. The other one is going to massively help you in attack and be pretty damn good in defense as well. So I think those are the two builds for artillery, if you are looking to have two artillery pieces in your setup, that you should still work towards. However, if you are looking towards a third, this is an incredibly viable option. This is going to sit neatly in that middle ground where Argent Flame and Fist aren't particularly good at pop-out attacks, even though they have splash damage, but they haven't really got the range to back it up, and they don't really have any bonuses that they can leverage on a specific single target. However, the splash damage is outstandingly good in a field fight. But it's also sitting just beneath the ability to absolutely level a base with the siege bonuses that you get from Vent and Eye. So it sits in a nice middle ground. So if you have 3 artillery pieces, this is an incredibly good option, and I would actually recommend it. Anyway, I've been the Smoking Cheddar, and you've been very patient, and I am very exasperated with the L4 already. Thank you very much for watching, and there'll be a link to the Discord in the description box down below. Be aware, if you do join, you will need to give a like to the rules. If you don't like the rules, then you won't see past the rule page. This is something that catches out bots very easily, and it catches out idiots even easier, apparently. No offense. You're more than welcome to come on there and bully me, ask me questions. There's a lot of profanity. I will not apologise. There are plenty of memes. Be an adult about it. It is just fun on the internet. And just have a good time if you do decide to tag along. Please, though, if you do tag along, get yourself a headset. Oh, you might use a tablet, I hear you say. Oh, I use a phone. Dude, Amazon's a thing. Amazon's a thing. You can just type in Bluetooth headset. You can get a Sony pair of these that Bluetooth to your damn phone with a bloody mic and everything. Not Sony, but I don't think the Sony one has a mic. But you know, you can use the microphone that's built into one of these. It's hot. Drink some water, guys, and just, if you are looking for a field gun build, this is something that I think you'll like. I think you'll like it. Anyway, that's the end of that.